Welcome to Unsheltered Conversations, a podcast from HomeAid America where we take an honest look at homelessness and the people, policies, and partnerships working to end it. I'm your host, Scott Larson, CEO of HomeAid. In each episode, we'll talk with builders, nonprofit leaders, advocates, and those with lived experience to explore the deeper stories that often go untold. And today, for our very first episode, I'm joined by someone whose voice has shaped so much of how HomeAid shows up in the world, our Chief Marketing Communications Officer, Monique Waddington. We're talking about why this podcast exists, what it means to give a voice to those who are unsheltered, and the role storytelling plays in helping all of us build a more compassionate response to homelessness. Let's get started. So Monique, before we dive into the heart of the conversation today, let's start with something simple. What excites you about launching this podcast and why now?
Okay. Well, hi, Scott. I'm glad that we are finally getting this going. I am very excited about it. And what excites me about launching this podcast is I firmly believe that knowledge is power. And the more that we get out there about the issue of homelessness, having a space to discuss all aspects of homelessness and the solutions will make us more powerful because we're going to have more knowledge and more things out there. And I think everybody has a perception of what homelessness is, and it's their perception. So sharing that, I think, also helps other people understand what everyone thinks and how hopefully we will then solve this issue.
That's great. And I'm glad that we're also at this time. And why did we choose the name of our podcast to be Unsheltered Conversations? And what does that title mean to you personally and professionally?
Well, we talked about a lot of different ones, but I think this one really encompassed what we want this podcast to be like. It obviously it ties in the building industry, unsheltered. We're talking about people that are unsheltered, so there's the literal part to it. But then also, again, when you go a little past the literal part, it gives you, again, the space to talk about all the aspects of it. We don't want to just talk about the preconceived ideas or the stats. We want to talk about the people that are involved in trying to solve the solution and the people that are experiencing or at risk of homelessness.
And as we looked at different communication tools, how do you see that this podcast will help us move beyond just the traditional forms of communication that we've done into something new and maybe more relational and real than maybe some of the other communication channels like a newsletter or some of the effective things that we've been doing in social media? But what's your take on how this is going to expand?
Well, I think it just expands our tools, right? And it goes, the newsletters and social media and word of mouth all has its place. I don't want to replace any of it, but it is 2025. And podcasts are relevant. And I also think that it has a good chance of introducing HomeAid and the concepts of what we do and then also the conversation about homelessness to a whole different audience. There are people that don't listen to music. There are people that listen to podcasts. And that wasn't true 10 years ago or 15, 20 years ago, and so I think that we have to take advantage of all the tools that are available to us, and this is just a new one. So hopefully we reach more people, or we reach the people that do know about us, and we can just validate that relationship and move forward with it and move past other ways that we use.
Well, as moving to a little bit more from a personal perspective, so people can get to know a little bit about you. You've been with HomeAid for a number of years now. And what first drew you to HomeAid's mission? And what keeps you here?
Well, so I have been here with HomeAid 6.5 years. Every year I love it more and more. And I think the reason for that is for me, I believe that the only predictable thing about life is that it's unpredictable. So I think that HomeAid encompasses that, right? We meet people where they are. We don't worry so much about how you got here. We worry about how to fix the place where you're at and offer you the tools and the understanding and the compassion to get you past that place if that's what you need. So that's what I love about HomeAid. I always say you can't put HomeAid in a box, because we don't just say, oh, we do it this way. When HomeAid is confronted with an issue, it's not, can't we do it? It's how do we do it? What do we do? And again, that goes with my kind of philosophy, is that in life, it's just unpredictable. And at any point in time, anybody with any situation is going to need help, because you help up or a hand up. And that's what HomeAid does. HomeAid provides that hand to get you to a more stable place, regardless of your situation.
Yeah, and obviously for conversations at a later date on this podcast, our work, the unpredictable work that we've fallen into in Lahaina after the devastating fires, and what's emerging in Central Texas after the floods. You're absolutely right. We will step into it and seek how do we best help in those times of clearly unpredictability.
Right. And that's what I like about us. We don't just say, this is our model and this is what we do. We have a model and we have what we have done, but we're always open to, okay, this situation is not anything that we've, experienced before, but how can we help? How can we step in? What does the community need? And in the case of natural disasters, I mean, that's just not something you can predict.
So from a personal perspective, is there a particular moment, a story, a person that you've encountered in your time with HomeAid that has, really stayed with you or reshaped how you view this issue of homelessness?
So I have two. And the first one is, I was at a HomeAid Colorado breakfast. I'm from Colorado, so I attend a lot of the HomeAid Colorado events. And I was at a breakfast, and a woman who was speaking, who had lived experience and was currently living in one of our projects, was a veteran. She was college educated. She was a licensed RN, so she was a nurse and working as a nurse, and she found herself living in a car with her two kids. And that just really, because that's not the stereotype, right? She's not the person. She didn't have drug addiction. She unfortunately found herself in a bad relationship, and this is where it happened. But that can happen to anybody, and it really struck me of people who I think would be surprised to hear her story and to hear that she has a paycheck, a pretty good one. Nurses, they don't probably get paid as much as they should, but so that just struck me that this is a living, breathing example of how it's because so many people, I think, when you talk about homelessness, their first thing is they choose to be, and that's not true. And, that's certainly not the case the majority of the time. And I thought that this particular person was a great example of that. It can happen to anybody. We are all just possibly, steps away, or an unpredictable situation happening to where we may need the use of one of our projects or something like that to help us at our time of need. So that's my first one.
Okay.
Did you want to talk about that?
Said there was a second. Yes.
Okay. So my second is my most favorite project, and I've actually never seen it, but I've written about it and read about it and posted pictures and those type of stuff, is a project in Utah that focuses on it's basically a hospice for people experiencing homelessness. It's a place that they go to die. And I get chills every single time I talk about it, because the dignity of that is, it speaks so much, and it speaks to exactly what HomeAid is about, right? Everybody deserves a safe place to live at whatever stage of life that they are at. And I love the fact that there was in-kind donations. People donated to this project to make sure that people that were on the streets had a place to go to die. And to me, that just speaks volumes to the kind of compassion, and the people that are out there, they're willing to help for that. Where other people, you could think, why spend the money? Let's spend the money on a facility for children, because they have a whole life ahead of them. But the beauty of people understanding the value that everybody deserves dignity at any point in their life. So those are my two.
You're striking a chord. That's one of my favorite and most touching as well. You've recently moved, in the Denver metro area, and the community that you live in now is a little more central in the Denver city than in a suburb. But how has your perspective evolved, with you involved with HomeAid, as you've engaged more deeply with this issue of homelessness, and it's very, very real in your community that you moved to? How's your perspective changed?
Well, I don't know if it's changed. I think it's just maybe fortified, right? That, and I've told you this many times. I know that everybody has a story, right? There's a reason why those people, I live in Denver proper, and not very far from the main highway that goes through Denver. And every time I get off on that highway to turn left to get near my community, there's always multiple people there. And there's not just the one person on the other side of the street. There's somebody in the median. You can see that there's somebody down, closer to the highway. There's people that are experiencing homelessness all over that particular intersection. And, and not always the same people. So I think my perspective is that this is just real. And again, everybody has a story. I don't believe that those individuals said, hey, I'm going to go live on a street corner, right? It just wasn't one day they woke up and said, I think I like that area. I'm just going to get a tent and go live there. There's a gazillion reasons as to why they wound up there. And it's not really my place to judge, right? See, I think that's what HomeAid is so great about. We don't worry about what got them there. We worry about how to get them to a more stable and safe and dignified place to deal with the issues that did get them there. And so I think it just fortifies that. And then one time, again, with speaking to, I don't even know where it came from, but different people. So I think there's always the question of, should you give them money? And I personally kind of go back and forth. I don't really know what the answer is, but somebody, when I first started here, somebody said, at least make eye contact and at least smile. And because before I used to always put my head down, right? Like, don't make eye contact, don't engage, but I don't do that anymore. I look up. I don't say come over. I don't motion them to come over, but I make eye contact with them. And it's funny, they make it back, and they don't always come, they don't come to my car, but it's just the acknowledging of their presence and the fact that they matter. And I think that, and because I have the opportunity to do that on a regular basis now, because of the community I live in, it's given me the confidence to do that. The first couple of times I did it, I was not comfortable, but I've gotten a lot better.
Yeah. Well, to expand a little bit on the storytelling piece, as our chief marketing and communications officer, you've always emphasized storytelling. And why do you think storytelling is such a powerful tool? And particularly as it relates to homelessness, you talked about it a little bit, but can you expand on that aspect of the importance of storytelling?
Well, I think one of the biggest tools that we need to solve or make any gains with this issue is compassion. We need everybody to be compassionate about the issue so that they're not judging. They're not thinking that they just came there or that they could just fix it, that they could just decide one day to not be homeless without any other, intervention. And telling people's story, I think, increases compassion, because we're all people. We all have had, if we haven't had personal experience, we're probably not as far away from it as we think. We have sisters and brothers and mothers and grandfathers and uncles and friends that have either experienced this or are close or could be close to. And so I think that when we tell those stories, it's not just telling a number. The numbers are important because it's important to qualify the work that we do, but the stories are what increases the passion, and to tell people that, hey, this is this person's story. And then somebody used to say, somebody could think, I know a person that did that. I know a person that wound up. I know a person that when they were 17, they were in that, but they got out of it, and this is how they got out of it. So they could see that, there's two roads sometimes, the person that did get out of the situation that would have put them there to the person that didn't. And sometimes that's just a circumstance or simple luck or, just a simple thing that didn't happen or did happen. Right. And so I just think that it increases compassion, and they're not just people on a street corner, they're people. And it's not just street corners, it's cars, and it's just one paycheck away, many times. Maybe they do have a home right now, but then if something happens and someone gets sick and they have a medical bill, then they can't pay the rent, and suddenly they're living in their car or they're living on a friend's couch, right? Telling that story makes people realize that they're probably closer to it than they think. It's not an us versus them thing. It's an all of us thing. And I think that stories do that.
So as we look to build out our podcast, Unsheltered Conversations, what do you hope our listeners will walk away with after hearing an episode, whether or not it's this one or one of our other upcoming guests? Is it empathy? Is it action, awareness? What are you hoping that people do? What is it that you want them to walk away with?
Well, I think it's all of the above of what you said. I think increasing compassion about the issue is going to make the issue more attainable. I think anytime you're trying to fix a problem, regardless what it is, you have to break it down into small pieces and fix them, that way, because otherwise it's just too big and too daunting. So I'm hoping that with these conversations and the different guests we have with their different expertise, their different lived experience, whether it is on this, actually have experienced homelessness, or if somebody else that they know, I'm hoping that they bring all of that to start to highlight not only the issue and the complexity of the issue, but also there is a solution. We can make an impact on this. Even, sometimes you're just like, it's too big. There's too many people on the street. There's, it's too much. You can't do it. You can't make an impact. And that's just not true. And so I think that having these conversations from all of the different perspectives that we will have with our guests, it'll prove that. It'll prove that there are ways that we can make a difference, and then highlight those ways. And again, sometimes it's giving money, sometimes it's volunteering, sometimes it's making eye contact with the person on the street corner. So.
Because we certainly don't want someone to just listen to a story or, right, have their ears tickled. We want them to not only just be informed, but we want them to invite them into the solution.
Right. Yeah. Yes. And again, I think compassion turns into action.
Yep.
So when you feel strongly about something, it motivates you to get involved. And even if it's just being more aware, again, knowledge is power. The more we know, and then the next time you hear something, if you listen to one of our episodes and you understand that the complexity of why people find themselves in this circumstances, then you'll be able to tell somebody the next time you hear your friend say, oh, they choose to be homeless, and you can then, stop that myth. And because you've listened to this and so it's not, the action it's going to take for the solution are a lot, and there's a lot that we can do, and different circumstances will call for different actions.
Yeah.
And hopefully we highlight that.
So as we look ahead, who are you most excited to the voices to hear on upcoming episodes? Whether or not it's our builders, the architects, our advocates, service providers, people with lived experience. What are you excited about?
Well, again, as a cop-out, all of them. But no, because again, I think that the insights that people bring are just so important, because like I said, I believe that homelessness is a personal issue, because I think we interpret it in our own personal way, though, so hearing how everybody interprets this. But people with lived experience is always amazing, because again, you just can't put people in a box, and you think you could hear 3 things about them and figure out why they're in the circumstance they are, but that's not true. They have a very complex story. And then our builders, are amazing. The reason HomeAid got started is because they wanted to give back, and it's just so much easier to give back doing the things you know how to do. So they know how to build, and that's what a lot of people that are experiencing homeless need. They need a place to go and heal. They can build those places. So hearing the impact from our partners, our building partners, will be amazing. Our affiliates do. They do amazing things every single day. They are our unsung heroes, right? They're on the ground as soon as they hear about things in Hawaii and the wildfires in California, the recent floods in Texas. They're right there. How can we help? What do we need? Going with our service providers. So the affiliates, hearing the affiliate stories, I think are, and not just their successes, but their struggles, so that we can understand how the village it takes to deal with this issue. And then I would say our service providers, because again, our service providers, talk about front lines. They are the people that they take the facility that we provide for them, and they save lives. They improve lives, and they help people find that place to where they can now have hopefully a very bright future, or at least a positive one. And I think everybody deserves that.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up our affiliates. We have 19, soon to be 20 affiliates with emerging market for us in the Delaware Valley. But you're right, this is really an opportunity for us to highlight our affiliates and their work, and really bring focus to how they're responding to their individual needs in their communities. So as our Chief Marketing and Communications Officer, how does this podcast really ultimately fit into your broader strategy for HomeAid's public presence and our brand, and just the impact that we're having? How does it fit in?
Well, I think it just expands our exposure, expands our awareness. Like I said, hopefully we get an audience that we might not have. A lot of younger people listen to podcasts. So, hopefully getting in that space will be great. And then also just having a place to have honest, unsheltered conversations, to where we can talk about, what do you feel? Because I don't think people like to admit, like I just did, where you I used to put my head down because I didn't want to make eye contact with the people that were on the street corner when I was turning left, right? And so I think that's hard to admit, but it's honest, and we're not going to get past those things and figure out how to make that better unless we're honest. And I do think that this gives us space with many different perspectives to have those honest conversations. And that's the only way we're going to move forward with solutions.
No, absolutely. So when we gain our audience, our listeners and our partners and donors and volunteers, how do you want them to amplify this podcast and the stories that it's told?
Word of mouth. Talk about it. Talk about, hey, I was listening to this, you're at dinner with your friends on a Friday night. I listened to this podcast today. Like, this came across my feed, and I was like, what is this? And I listened to this, and did you know, if they get one thing, but 2 or 3 things that, did you know that this happened? Did you know that there's a place that provides hospice for people that are dying, that are otherwise experiencing homelessness. Did you know, right? Like, because I think a lot of people would know that. I had been working here for a couple years before I realized that that's actually a place, and so word of mouth discussion. If people can talk about things, and if you are passionate about it, chances are you're going to fire somebody else up, and that's what we need. And then just the technology stuff, like, comment, share. We're always open to feedback. So, a place to give us feedback and let us know what you think. Let us know of what would be a good thing for you to hear. What do you want to learn about? What, those type of things. So just communicate.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap up this pilot podcast, and it's been a great conversation, and I've appreciated just hearing from you, because we talk virtually every day in one form or another, but to have this focused conversation with you and I, what do you, to just either double down on something you've already said, what do you want people to know? Not just about HomeAid, but just about the human experience of homelessness.
Again, I think I just want to reiterate that it's not them, it's all of us, and life happens, and you have no idea what that lane that's going to take you in. And knowing that there's a place like HomeAid that's supported by the partners and the businesses and the industries that we're supported by out there that want to help you when that happens. You're not alone. So if something puts you in that situation, you're not alone. There are people out there that want to help with the solution. But just understanding that our neighbors that are experiencing homelessness are our neighbors. They are people. They are people that you might have known in a different lifetime, or people that you love, and that there could be solutions for them.
Yeah. And I guess one final question, you may have already mentioned this, but ending on this note of what gives you hope in this work that we do?
People. People come through. I know in my own personal life, people come through when you need it. So people give me hope. And again, whenever there is a tragedy, or when we or one of our affiliates reach out and say, hey, we need this, we usually get it, almost always. And, people in Lahaina, when that horrible tragedy in Maui happened, we got inundated with, how do we help? What do we do? How do we make this better? And when you tell people stories, how do we fix that? How do we make sure that doesn't happen? How do I make sure that doesn't happen to my daughter? What do I do to make sure that doesn't happen? And so people, I think people that are going to donate to a hospice for people experiencing homelessness, it's people. People give me hope.
Absolutely. Well, Monique, thank you. I'm excited for this to be out there, and the future of what we're going to do with Unsheltered Conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this first episode of Unsheltered Conversations. If something today sparked a new perspective or made you think a little differently about homelessness, we'd love for you to share this episode, leave a review, and help us to keep the conversation going. You can learn more about HomeAid and subscribe to future episodes at homeaid.org/podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, let's keep building not just housing, but hope and a future without homelessness. I'm Scott Larson. Thank you for listening.